Captain Tay sat in his command chair aboard the exploration ship Horizon's Edge, watching the stars drift past the viewport. It was his third year of deep space patrol, and honestly, it had become boring. Every day was the same. Check scanners, move to next sector, find nothing, repeat. Earth had built hundreds of ships to explore the galaxy, but in all that time, they had never found anyone else out here. Lieutenant Hay looked up from her console suddenly. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, confusion clear on her face. Tay noticed the change in her posture and walked over to her station. "What is it?" he asked. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange. It's a quantum signal. Very complex. And it's definitely not natural." Her voice shook slightly with excitement, or maybe fear. "I think it's a message." Tay felt his heart beat faster. In all of human history, this would be the first time anyone had detected alien communication. He took a deep breath to steady himself. "Can you decode it?" Hay worked for several minutes while the bridge crew gathered around her station. Everyone held their breath. Finally, the computer chimed, and text began appearing on the screen. The translation software struggled at first, then locked onto patterns and meaning. The message was desperate. It came from something called the Velothian Cooperative. They were 7 different alien species who lived together in peace. For 3 generations, they had been fighting a war against an enemy they called the Devourers. These Devourers were not like normal enemies. They did not want land or resources in the usual way. They wanted to consume everything. Every plant, every animal, every living thing on a planet. They ate it all and turned it into more Devourers. The Velothians were losing badly. They once had over 100 worlds. Now they had only 12 left. Their fleets were destroyed. Their people were dying. In maybe 6 months, the last Velothian worlds would fall, and 7 billion people would be eaten alive. The message included star charts and data files. It showed the Devourer advance like a wave of death spreading across space. It showed projections, too. If the Velothians fell, the Devourers would keep expanding. In about 10 years, they would reach human space. At the end of the message was a request. The Velothians had detected human radio signals and traced them back to Earth. They were asking for help. Maybe a few ships. Some weapons. Military advisors. They did not ask for much because they assumed humanity was a small civilization like themselves. They were just hoping someone, anyone, would answer their call. Tay read the message 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Then he looked at his crew. They all looked back at him with wide eyes. This was bigger than anything they had trained for. "Send this to Earth Command immediately," Tay ordered. "Priority Alpha. Mark it as first contact scenario. And add my recommendation that we respond with everything we have." The message reached Earth in hours. President Na convened the United Earth Council for an emergency session. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered in Geneva. The chamber was silent as they watched the Velothian message play on the screens. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Some council members argued for caution. They said humanity should send a small force, maybe 50 ships. Others wanted to ignore the message entirely. Why should Earth fight someone else's war? But Admiral Jin, commander of the Third Fleet, stood up and presented a different view. He was an older man with gray hair and scars from the colony insurrection years ago. When he spoke, people listened. "Members of the council," he began, "the Velothians asked for backup. They need help desperately. But look at their projections. If they fall, we are next. The Devourers will come for us eventually. We can fight them now, alongside allies who know the enemy, or we can fight them alone in 10 years when they arrive at Earth." He paused and looked around the room. "But there is another reason to go." They called for help. They reached across the stars and asked us to stand with them. How we respond will define humanity's place in this galaxy. Do we help those who call to us? Or do we hide and hope danger passes us by? He pulled up a display showing Earth's military strength. Hundreds of ships built over decades of expansion. Millions of trained soldiers. Weapons that had never been tested in real war. They asked for backup. Let me show them what that word means to humanity. The room erupted in discussion. Arguments flew back and forth. But slowly, opinion shifted. If the Devourers were as bad as the message claimed, Earth could not afford to let them grow stronger. And if humanity wanted allies in this galaxy, they needed to prove they would stand by those allies. At 3 a.m, President Na called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Earth would respond, but not with 50 ships. Not with 100. They would mobilize everything. Every fleet. Every carrier. Every soldier who could fight. President Na recorded the response message herself. Her face was tired but determined. To the Velothian Cooperative. We have received your call for help. We are humanity of Earth. We have never met another species before, but we understand what it means to face extinction. We understand what it means to fight for survival. Backup is coming. Hold your worlds. Keep your people alive. We are bringing everything we have. She paused, then added, and to the Devourers, wherever you are. You made a mistake. You threatened our new friends. Soon, you will learn what happens when humanity decides to go to war. The message was sent across the stars using the same quantum communication method the Velothians had used. It would take 3 days to reach them. On Earth and across all 47 colony systems, the mobilization began immediately. Shipyards that built commercial freighters started building warships instead. Factories retooled to produce weapons and ammunition. The military recalled every ship from exploration and patrol. Reserve forces activated for the first time in 20 years. In living rooms across Earth. Families watched the news broadcasts with mixed feelings. Some were proud. Some were scared. Parents held their children closer, knowing some of those children would soon be soldiers heading into the unknown. Admiral Jin stood in the command center, watching the fleet assemble on the displays. 847 warships. 2,400 support vessels, 340,000 military personnel. It was the largest military force humanity had ever created. Lieutenant Hay received a promotion to Chief Xenolinguistics Officer. She would be going with the fleet to help communicate with the Velothians. Captain Tay was made Commodore and given command of the advance force. As he packed his quarters, he looked at a picture of Earth and wondered if he would ever see it again. Across human space, the Armada gathered. Soon, they would jump to Velothian space and join a war that was not originally theirs. But Admiral Jin had been right. The Velothians had called for help, and humanity had answered. Now they would see it through to the end. Whatever that end might be, the stars waited. The Devourers waited. And humanity prepared to show the galaxy what they were made of. The Mars orbital shipyards had never been so busy. Thousands of workers moved between the massive construction frames where new warships were taking shape. The shipyard manager, a woman named Sun, had been told she had 2 weeks to prepare the fleet for deployment. She had worked for 30 years in shipyards and never seen anything like this. Every available ship was being called in. Exploration vessels, patrol boats, colony defense ships, everything. They all needed upgrades, repairs, and weapons. Sun's teams worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts right there in the shipyards. Coffee became more valuable than gold. On Earth, Commander Yun sat in a dark room surrounded by holographic displays. She was part of the Strategic Planning Division, and her job was to figure out how to fight an enemy humanity had never encountered. The Velothian data files had provided some information about the Devourers, but not enough. She ran simulation after simulation. The Devourers attacked in massive swarms. They had no fear of death. They could not be negotiated with. Every tactic Yun tried in the simulations resulted in heavy casualties. She rubbed her tired eyes and started another simulation. There had to be a way to win without losing half the fleet. In a training facility on Luna, Major Sang watched his Marines practice boarding maneuvers. These soldiers were good, but they had never fought a real war. The last major conflict had been the colony insurrection 15 years ago, and most of these Marines had been children then. Sang himself had been young during that fight. He still carried scars from it, both on his body and in his mind. Again, he shouted as the Marines cleared a mock-up of an enemy ship. They were too slow. The Devourers would not wait politely while humans figured out the best angle of attack. If you move that slow in real combat, you will be dead in seconds. Again, the Marines reset and ran the drill again. And again. And again. Sang would push them until they moved like one organism. Their lives depended on it. Dr. Mi sat alone in her laboratory, studying the biological data the Velothians had sent about the Devourers. What she saw disturbed her deeply. These creatures were not natural. No evolution would create something like this. They had been engineered, probably as weapons by some ancient civilization. But somehow they had gained intelligence. They had become aware. And then they had turned on their creators. The Devourers could adapt quickly. They evolved new forms in response to threats. They reproduced by consuming biomass and converting it into more Devourers. One Devourer could become 10 in just days if it had enough food. The mathematics were horrifying. Mi calculated that the current Devourer population was probably in the billions, possibly tens of billions. She sent her analysis to Admiral Jin with a note. We are not just fighting an enemy. We are fighting a plague. And if we do not stop them completely, they will come back. Meanwhile, Engineer Day and his team were making final adjustments to the new weapon systems. Human weapons had been designed to fight other humans, ships, and the occasional space debris. They had never been optimized for fighting organic ships that moved in swarms. They had spent the last week redesigning firing solutions. The new point defense grids could track 10,000 objects at once. The mass driver cannons had been recalibrated to fire projectiles at 15% of light speed. The fusion missiles had yields measured in gigatons. When Day looked at the specifications, even he felt a chill. These weapons could destroy cities, fleets, entire worlds. Are we sure we want to bring this much firepower? Asked one of his junior engineers, a young man named Ki. Dai looked at him seriously. The Devourers have consumed 89 worlds. Billions of people are dead. If we do not bring enough firepower, we will join them. All across human space, similar scenes played out. Pilots trained in simulators until their hands moved automatically. Doctors studied trauma medicine for injuries they hoped they would never see. Supply officers loaded ships with enough food, water, and ammunition for a long campaign. At a small apartment on Earth, a pilot named G sat at her kitchen table writing a letter to her daughter. The girl was only 5 years old, too young to understand where her mother was going or why. G tried to explain it simply. There are people far away who need help. Mommy has to go help them. I will come back as soon as I can. Be good for Grandma. I love you. She sealed the letter and put it in a drawer. Her husband would give it to their daughter if G did not come home. She did not let herself think about that possibility too much. If she did, she might not be able to get on the ship. In another home, a Marine sergeant named Hyan said goodbye to his husband. They had been married for 3 years. They had been planning to adopt a child next year. Now those plans were on hold. Hyan took off his wedding ring and placed it in his husband's hand. "Keep this safe for me," Hyan said quietly. "I will come back for it." His husband closed his hand around the ring, tears streaming down his face. "You better. I will be waiting." Across human civilization, millions of similar goodbyes happened. Some people were brave. Some were scared. Most were both. They were ordinary people being asked to do extraordinary things. The fleet assembled at the Mars orbital shipyards. 847 warships of various classes, from small corvettes to massive battle carriers. The flagship was the Indomitable, a 3-kilometer-long dreadnought that had been built 10 years ago, but never used in combat. Admiral Jin would command from their dock when the fleet was fully assembled. It stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Supply ships moved between the warships, making final deliveries. Shuttles carried personnel to their assigned vessels. Communication channels buzzed with traffic as commanders coordinated with their crews. Lieutenant Hay stood in the communication center of the Indomitable, watching the organized chaos. She had been promoted so quickly that she still felt like she was playing dress-up in her new uniform. But she had a job to do. She would be the first human to actually speak with aliens. The thought terrified and thrilled her at the same time. Commodore Tay inspected his squadron of 50 advanced ships. These would jump ahead of the main fleet to scout and make first contact with the Velothians. His crew was nervous, but ready. Tay had served with most of them for years. He trusted them with his life. Soon he would have to. Commander Yun finalized her tactical plans and uploaded them to the fleet database. She had done everything she could. The simulation still showed heavy casualties, but she had found ways to reduce them. She hoped her strategies would work in actual combat. War rarely went according to plan. In the Velothian star system, First Speaker Kel received humanity's response message. He played it for the Velothian High Council. At first, they thought it was a translation error. Then they thought it was a joke. Finally, when they saw the fleet manifest attached to the message, they sat in stunned silence. 847 warships, 340,000 soldiers. This species that had just learned other intelligent life existed was sending nearly their entire military to help. It seemed impossible. Kel's military advisor, an old veteran named Tor, reviewed the data 3 times. They are either insane or the most powerful species in the galaxy. Maybe both. Kel sent a return message. Humanity of Earth, we are grateful beyond words. But are you certain? This is not your war. You owe us nothing. The response came from Admiral Jin himself. You called for help. We answered. That is all that matters. We are coming. The day of departure arrived. Every news channel in human space broadcast the event. Families gathered around screens to watch. In orbit around Mars, the fleet completed final checks. Engines powered up. Jump drives began their warm-up sequences. Admiral Jin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable. Around him, his crew worked quietly and efficiently. He opened a channel to all ships in the fleet. This is Admiral Jin to all vessels. Today, we make history. We go not as conquerors, but as allies. We fight not for territory, but for survival. The Velothians called to us across the stars, and we answered. Now we will show them, and anyone else watching, what humanity stands for. All ships prepare for jump. The fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. The gravitational wake distorted space-time across 3 light years. Sensors across multiple star systems detected the massive energy signature. Anyone watching would know something significant had just happened. On Earth, President Na addressed humanity one final time before the fleet left communication range. They are our sons and daughters, are brothers and sisters. They go into the unknown to fight for people they have never met. They carry with them our hopes and our prayers. And they carry our promise. When someone calls for help, humanity answers. The fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel. The journey would take 5 days. 5 days to prepare mentally for what was coming. 5 days to train, to rest, to think about home. 5 days before they would arrive in Velothian space and see for themselves what they were truly facing. Aboard the ships, soldiers checked their weapons one more time. Pilots ran through flight procedures. Doctors prepared medical bays. Everyone found their own way to deal with the fear and anticipation. The war was coming, and humanity was ready to meet it. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Velothian space. Immediately, every sensor lit up with contacts. Debris fields floated where battles had been fought. Distress signals echoed from dying ships. And in the distance, the distinctive energy signatures of Devourer bioships pulsed like a disease spreading through space. Lieutenant Hay stared at her screens in horror. The Velothians had not exaggerated. This was a civilization on the edge of extinction. She opened communication channels and began broadcasting in the Velothian language. "This is Lieutenant Hay of the United Earth Alliance. We received your call. We are here to help." The response took several minutes. When it came, the voice on the other end was shaking. You actually came. We thought, we hoped, but we did not truly believe." A small diplomatic vessel approached the fleet. It was elegant, curved like a seashell, with beautiful blue and silver markings. Inside was First Speaker Kell and his staff. Their ship had sensors too, but those sensors had not been designed to register something as large as the human fleet. As they got closer, the numbers kept climbing. 100 ships, 500 ships, 800 ships. Kel felt dizzy. He had to sit down. His skin, which normally showed his emotions through color changes, flickered rapidly between shock white and joy gold. When his vessel finally docked with the Indomitable, he could barely walk. His legs felt weak. Admiral Jin met him in the docking bay with full military honors. An honor guard stood at attention. Jin himself wore his formal uniform. When Kell stepped off his ship, Jin bowed respectfully in the human manner. Kell, not knowing human customs, tried to bow back and nearly fell over. Hay quickly stepped forward to steady him. "First Speaker Kell," Jin said through Hay's translation, "welcome aboard. We are ready to fight for your people." Kell looked at the Admiral with his large golden eyes. Velothians were taller than humans, but thinner, more delicate. Their skin shifted colors constantly, showing emotions humans had to guess at. Right now, Kell's skin showed something like overwhelming gratitude mixed with disbelief. "You brought all of this for us?" Kell whispered. "We are strangers to you." "You were strangers," Jin corrected gently. "Now you are allies. Now you are friends. And we protect our friends." Over the next 3 days, humans and Velothians worked together to plan the war. It was not easy. The two species had very different ways of thinking about combat. Velothians preferred defense, shields, and evasion. They built their ships to survive hits and run away. Human ships were built differently. They had armor to absorb damage and weapons to destroy the enemy completely. Commander, Yun studied Velothian battle records with growing frustration. "You never attack? You always retreat?" The Velothian military commander, a serious individual named Tor, looked offended. "We preserve lives. We evacuate civilians. We save who we can. And while you save, the Devourers consume more worlds and grow stronger," Yun said bluntly. "That strategy leads to slow extinction." She pulled up a tactical map. We need to go on offense. We need to take back territory. We need to cut them off from resources. Tor was shocked. You would deliberately destroy worlds to deny them to the enemy? Those worlds are already dead, Yun said quietly. The Devourers have consumed everything on them. But their biomass can be used to make more Devourers. If we burn those worlds completely, we stop their growth. The Velothian military staff looked horrified. This was not how they fought wars. This was brutal. This was cruel. But as they looked at their own casualty reports and territory losses, they realized it might also be necessary. Doctor Me spent hours with Velothian scientists, studying everything they knew about the Devourers. What she learned made her stomach turn. The Devourers were not just animals following instinct. They had intelligence. They learned. They remembered. Every battle taught them new lessons. They share information somehow, a Velothian scientist named La explained. Her skin showed patterns of fear gray. When we destroy their ships in one system, the ships in another system know about it. They adapt. Me thought about this carefully. A hive mind? Or some kind of network? We do not know. But yes, something like that. They are all connected. This information changed everything. Me immediately reported it to Admiral Jin. If the Devourers shared information across their entire species, then every battle would make them smarter. Humanity would have to win quickly before the Devourers learned too much. Meanwhile, the common soldiers were meeting each other. Major Sang's Marines conducted joint training with Velothian ground forces. The physical differences were obvious. Velothians were taller but weaker. They tired more quickly. But they were also faster and more flexible. A young Marine named Bio tried to keep up with a Velothian soldier during a running drill. The Velothian, whose name sounded like Ren in human language, moved with a grace Bio could not match. But when they got to the strength training, Bio lifted weights that would require 3 Velothians working together. Ren watched in amazement. Your world must have very strong gravity. Bio grinned. Strong enough to make us tough. But your speed is impressive. Maybe we can learn from each other. And they did. Human Marines learned Velothian movement techniques. Velothians learned human endurance training. Slowly, respect grew between them. They were different, but they were on the same side. That was what mattered. Not everyone was happy about the alliance. A Velothian counselor named Tel argued strongly against it. They are warmongers, he said at a council meeting. Look at their weapons. Look at their tactics. They speak of burning worlds as if it means nothing. How are they different from the Devourers? Hay attended that meeting to represent humanity. She listened to Tel's speech and asked to respond. The council agreed. You are right, Hay said simply. Humans are good at war. We have fought each other for thousands of years. We know how to destroy. But we also know how to build. We know how to protect. You sent a call for help across the stars. You did not know us. You did not know if we would even exist. But you called anyway. And we answered. She paused, looking around the chamber. We are not here to conquer you. We are here because you asked. Because when someone asks for help, humanity believes in giving it. Judge us by our actions, not by your fears. The council was silent for a long moment. Then Kel spoke. She is right. They came when we called. That speaks louder than our worries. After more debate, the Velothian Cooperative and United Earth Alliance signed a formal treaty. Humanity would lead all military operations. In exchange, once the war was won, human forces would leave Velothian space. Both sides would share technology and knowledge. Both sides would defend each other from future threats. The signing ceremony was broadcast to both species. Humans and Velothians watched their leaders stand together. It was the first interspecies alliance in known galactic history. Some people were excited. Some were worried. But most felt hope for the first time in months. Engineer Day worked with Velothian engineers to combine their technologies. Velothian shield generators were more advanced than human ones. Human weapons were more powerful than anything the Velothians had. Together, they created hybrid designs that had the best of both. A Velothian engineer named Sue watched. They install a human mass driver cannon on a Velothian destroyer. Will our ship handle the recoil from that weapon? They checked his calculations. With your shield generators absorbing some of the kinetic energy, yes. You will have the defensive power of a Velothian ship and the offensive power of a human ship. Sue's skin showed excited orange patterns. Our ancestors would not believe this. Working together with aliens to build better weapons. My ancestors would not believe it either, Day admitted. But here we are, making history. Admiral Jin called a final strategy meeting before the first major operation. All senior officers attended, both human and Velothian. The room was crowded with different species, different uniforms, different perspectives. But they all had the same goal. Jin stood at the front of the room and activated holographic star map. It showed Devourer territory highlighted in red. They have taken 89 worlds from you. They have built their numbers into the billions. If we fight them the old way, defensively, we will lose. So we are going to do something they have never seen before. We are going to attack. He pointed to a world called Veltara. This is their largest concentration. Millions of bioships. Billions of devourers on the surface. This is where we make our first strike. We go in with everything. We destroy their ships. We burn the planet. We show them that this war has changed. Tor, the Velothian military commander, looked worried. That is suicide. The casualties will be enormous. Yes, Jin agreed calmly. Some of us will die. But if we do not take this fight to them, all of us will die eventually. Better to die fighting on our terms than waiting for them to consume us. Commodore Tay raised his hand. My squadron will make the first jump. We will scout their defenses and transmit data before the main fleet arrives. Approved, Jin said. You leave in 6 hours. The main fleet follows in 12 hours. As the meeting ended, officers filed out quietly. Everyone was thinking about what was coming. This would not be a simulation or a drill. This would be real combat against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. Hay found Tay later in the observation deck. They stood together, looking out at the stars. Are you scared? She asked quietly. Terrified, Tay admitted, but also ready. We came here to do a job. Time to do it. Hay nodded. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would help. But sometimes words were not enough. So they just stood together in silence, two humans far from home, about to fight a war for strangers who had become friends. Across the combined fleet, similar moments played out. Soldiers checked weapons one more time. Engineers ran final diagnostics. Doctors prepared medical bays for wounded. Everyone dealt with the fear in their own way. The Velothians watched their new allies with a mixture of awe and worry. These humans were so confident, so aggressive, so willing to fight. It was inspiring and frightening at the same time. But as Kel told his council, they are what we need. They are the answer to our prayer. The countdown began. Soon the war would truly start, and the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity decided to fight. Commodore, Tay's squadron dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the planet Veltara. What they saw made even experienced officers feel sick. The planet that had once been green and beautiful was now covered in black and gray organic matter. The atmosphere glowed with a sickly yellow color, and surrounding the planet, like a cloud of insects, were approximately 400,000 Devourer bioships. "Send all data back to the main fleet," Tay ordered quietly, "and prepare for contact. They definitely see us." The Devourer ships turned toward the human squadron like a single organism. They moved in waves, pulsing forward with disgusting grace. Each bioship was different. Some were large like whales. Some were small like birds. All of them were alive, and Hungry Tay opened a channel to his 50 ships. "We are not here to win. We are here to learn. Stay in formation. Gather data. We jump out in 5 minutes, no matter what happens." "Understood?" His captains acknowledged. The Devourers opened fire first. Streams of acidic plasma and biological projectiles shot toward the human ships. The attacks hit human armor and did some damage, but not as much as the Devourers expected. Human ships were built to take punishment. "Return fire," Tay ordered. "All weapons." 50 human ships fired at once. Mass driver rounds moving at 15% of light speed punched through dozens of bioships in a single shot. Fusion missiles detonated among the swarm, vaporizing hundreds at a time. Point defense lasers cut through the smaller ships like they were paper. In 30 seconds, the humans destroyed over 5,000 Devourer ships. But the remaining swarm kept coming. They did not retreat. They did not show fear. They just kept attacking. 2 minutes until jump, Tay's navigator called out. "We have the data." "Good. All ships prepare to." Tay stopped. On the tactical display, he watched the Devourers change their formation. They were adapting already, learning from the last 30 seconds. They are smart. Everyone jump now. The human squadron engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished. Behind them, the Devourer swarm filled the space where they had been. Tay leaned back in his chair, breathing hard. They had survived, and they had learned something important. The Devourers adapted fast. Very fast. 12 hours later, Admiral Jin's main fleet arrived at Feltara. 800 ships formed a wall of steel and firepower. On the flagship Indomitable, Jin reviewed the data from Tay's scouting run. The numbers were worse than expected. 400,000 bioships. Probably billions of Devourers on the planet's surface. But Jin had made a decision. This is where humanity would make its stand. "All ships," Jin broadcasted. "Weapons free. We advance at full speed. Show them what human firepower looks like." The human fleet accelerated toward the planet. The Devourer swarm, having learned from their encounter with Tay's squadron, formed defensive layers. They were trying to minimize losses. It would not work. 800 ships opened fire at the same time. The space between the fleets filled with light. Mass driver rounds created trails of destruction. Fusion missiles turned clusters of bioships into expanding balls of plasma. The point defense grids created a wall of laser fire that nothing could penetrate in the first minute. The humans destroyed 40,000 Devourer ships. But the swarm was so large that 40,000 barely made a difference. They pushed forward, trying to surround the human fleet. Trying to use their numbers. Commander Yun watched the battle from the tactical center. Her simulations had predicted this. The Devourers only knew one strategy: overwhelm with numbers. She had prepared for it. Execute jump pattern Alpha. All battle groups separate and jump. The human fleet split into 20 groups. Each group made a short, faster-than-light jump, appearing behind or beside Devourer concentrations. Before the Devourers could react, the humans fired again. More thousands of bioships died. The Devourers tried to adapt. They spread out, making themselves harder to hit in groups. Yun smiled coldly. That was exactly what she wanted. Spread out, they were easier to destroy individually. All ships, free targeting. Hunt them. The battle became a slaughter. Human ships were faster, better armored, and had weapons the Devourers had never encountered. The organic ships tried every tactic they knew. They tried ramming. They tried suicide attacks. They tried swarming individual targets. Nothing worked. After 6 hours of continuous fighting, the humans had destroyed 300,000 Devourer ships. The remaining 100,000 finally did something surprising. They retreated. They jumped away using their own form of faster-than-light travel. On the Indomitable, Jin watched them go. He felt no satisfaction. "Earn the planet," he ordered. "Complete sterilization." 200 human ships moved into bombardment positions. For 8 hours, they fired everything they had at Veltara. The planet's surface heated to thousands of degrees. The atmosphere burned away. Every living thing, every devourer, every spore, every cell died. When it was over, Veltara was a dead rock. Lifeless and empty. Lieutenant Hay watched the bombardment from the communication center. She felt sick. Yes, the Devourers were evil. Yes, this was necessary. But watching a planet die was horrible. She wondered if her soul would ever feel clean again. While the main fleet fought at Veltara, Commodore Tay took his squadron to attack Devourer supply worlds. These were planets that the Devourers had already consumed, using them as breeding grounds. Tay's orders were simple: destroy everything. His squadron arrived at a world called Curson. The planet was completely covered in Devourer biomass. It pulsed and moved like it was breathing. Millions of Devourers crawled across the surface. It looked like a vision of hell. Tay did not hesitate. All ships, orbital bombardment. Maximum yield. Fire. For 6 hours, 50 ships poured fire onto Curson. When they finished, nothing remained alive. Tay repeated this at 4 more worlds. Each time felt necessary. Each time felt wrong. War was like that, he thought. Sometimes the right thing felt terrible. Major Sang's Marines got their mission 3 days into the war. They would be the first to land on a Devourer-held world and retake it through ground combat. The target was Vel Minor, a small colony world with less than 1 million Devourers on the surface. High Command thought it was a good test case. Sang stood in the drop bay with 10,000 Marines. They wore full combat armor and carried enough weapons to fight a small army, which was exactly what they would be doing. "Listen up," Sang called out. "The Devourers down there do not think like us. They do not fear. They do not retreat. They will come at you until they die or you die. So make sure they die first. Stay with your unit. Watch each other's backs. And remember your training." The drop pods launched. 10,000 Marines fell through the atmosphere like meteors. The pods slammed into the surface hard enough to create craters. Before the dust settled, the Marines were out and moving, weapons ready. The Devourers attacked immediately. They came in waves. Some were bipedal with blades for arms. Some were quadrupeds that spat acid. Some flew with poisoned stingers. They made horrible screeching sounds and moved with terrifying speed. The Marines formed defensive lines and opened fire. The sound was deafening. Rifle fire, explosions, screaming. A young Marine named Woe found himself face to face with a Devourer that had broken through the line. It raised its blade arm to kill him. Before it could, a Velothian soldier appeared and shot it with an ionic disruptor. The Devourer collapsed. Twitching. Woe looked at his rescuer, a Velothian whose name he could not pronounce. The Velothian's skin showed determination red. They nodded at each other and continued fighting side by side. The battle for Velminer lasted 3 days. The Devourers never stopped attacking. They came in endless waves, dying by the thousands, but never giving up. The Marines held their ground, fighting through exhaustion and fear. Velouthian soldiers fought alongside them, proving they were not as weak as some humans had assumed. When it finally ended, Vel Minor was free. But the cost was high. 847 humans dead, 1,200 wounded, 234 Velouthians killed. Major Sang walked through the field hospital, looking at the wounded. Some would recover, some would not. All of them had done their duty. On the Indomitable, Dr. Me made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying captured Devourer samples, trying to understand how they worked. What she found was both fascinating and terrifying. The Devourers had a quantum-entangled neural network. Every single Devourer was connected to every other Devourer across the entire galaxy. She brought this information to Admiral Jin immediately. Sir, they are not just a hive mind. They are all one mind. When we kill Devourers in one battle, every other Devourer learns from it instantly. They share memories, tactics, everything. Jin understood the implications right away. So they are learning from every fight. Getting smarter, adapting. Exactly. Look at this data. Me showed him analysis of recent battles. In the first engagement, they attacked in simple swarms. In the second engagement, they used defensive formations. In the third, they tried flanking maneuvers. They are evolving their tactics in real time. Jin felt cold. Humanity's advantage was surprise and superior firepower. But if the Devourers kept learning, that advantage would disappear. Can we disrupt their network? Maybe, if we can find the central node. Every quantum network needs an anchor point. If we destroy that, the whole system might collapse. Find it, Jin ordered. Find it fast. Because if we do not, this war gets a lot harder. Over the next 2 weeks, the Human-Velouthian Alliance fought battle after battle. They destroyed Devourer ships by the millions. They reclaimed 7 worlds. They burned 14 Devourer, breeding planets to lifeless rocks. The Velouthians were amazed. In 2 weeks, humanity had accomplished what the Cooperative could not do in 3 years. But the Devourers were learning. Each battle was harder than the last. They developed harder armor. They created new ship forms specifically designed to fight human tactics. They were adapting to survive. Commander Yun ran new simulations constantly, trying to stay ahead. Engineer Day upgraded weapons as fast as possible. Major Sang trained his Marines in new tactics. Everyone was working at their limit. And then Dr. Me found it. The central node. The anchor of the Devourer quantum network. It was located deep underground on the Nest, the primary Devourer world. The place where the first Devourers had been created thousands of years ago. Admiral Jin called his senior staff together. If we destroy this node, we might end the entire war in one strike. But the Nest is defended by every remaining Devourer ship. Our scouts estimate 4 million bioships. The room was silent. 4 million ships. Even with human firepower, the casualties would be enormous. But if they did not try, the war would drag on for years. Maybe forever. We go, Jin decided. We take every ship we have. We hit the Nest with everything. And we end this. He looked around the room at the tired faces of his staff. This is what we came here to do. Time to finish it. The word spread through the fleet. One final battle. One last push. Then either victory or death. Soldiers prepared in their own ways. Some prayed. Some wrote letters home. Some just sat quietly, thinking about what came next. The combined human-Velouthian fleet prepared for the largest battle in galactic history. They would attack the Nest. They would destroy the node. They would end the Devourer, threat once and for all. or they would die trying. The combined fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nest system. What they saw would have made weaker beings turn back immediately. The planet itself was massive, 3 times the size of Earth, wrapped in organic structures that pulsed with sickly light. And surrounding it, like a wall of death, were over 4 million Devourer bioships. Admiral Jin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the tactical display. Every ship in the fleet was represented by a blue dot. The Devourer forces were red. There was so much red that it looked like a cloud. He took a deep breath and opened the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Jin. What we face today is the largest enemy force ever assembled. They outnumber us 5 to 1. Many of us will not survive this battle. But if we do not fight, billions will die. The Velothians will be extinct. And eventually, the Devourers will reach Earth. He paused. We came here because someone called for help. We came because it was the right thing to do. Now we finish what we started. All ships advance. For humanity. For the Velothians. For every life the Devourers have taken. We end this today. The fleet moved forward as one. 800 human ships. 76 Velothian vessels. They accelerated toward the enemy, weapons charging. The distance closed rapidly. 300,000 kilometers. 200,000. 100,000. The Devourer swarm waited until the Allied fleet was committed, then launched forward in a massive wave. 4 million ships moving together created a sight that was beautiful and terrifying. They had learned from every previous battle. Their formations were sophisticated. Their tactics were clever. This would not be like earlier fights. All ships, fire at will, Jin ordered. The opening exchange lit up space brighter than a sun. Every ship in the human fleet fired simultaneously. Mass driver rounds created corridors of destruction. Fusion missiles detonated in massive clusters. Point defense lasers wove a deadly net. In the first 10 seconds, 180,000 Devourer ships died, but that still left nearly 4 million. And they had learned to minimize casualties. The swarm split into dozens of formations, each one trying to flank or surround different parts of the Allied fleet. Commander Yun, coordinating tactics from the Indomitable, immediately recognized the strategy. They are trying to divide us, she said. Battle groups, execute dispersal pattern. Do not let them surround anyone. The human fleet split into smaller groups and began executing short, faster-than-light jumps, appearing behind enemy concentrations and destroying them before jumping again. It was the same tactic that had worked before, but the Devourers had prepared for it. This time, they left ships in reserve specifically to intercept jumping targets. Several human ships jumped directly into ambushes. The destroyer Courage took massive damage and exploded, killing all 400 crew members. The carrier Justice lost its engines and began drifting, unable to maneuver. Devourer ships swarmed it. Commodore Tay saw the Justice's situation on his tactical display. His squadron was closest. All ships emergency jumped to Justice's position. We are not leaving them. Tay's 50 ships appeared around the crippled carrier and formed a defensive sphere. They fired constantly, keeping the Devourers at bay while the Justice evacuated its crew. Tay's own ship, the Horizon's Edge, was taking heavy damage. Hull breaches appeared across 3 decks. Life support began failing. "Sir, we need to retreat," his first officer urged. "We cannot hold much longer." Tay looked at the Justice. The evacuation was only half complete. If they left now, 2,000 people would die. He made his decision. All crew to escape pods. Everyone evacuate except essential bridge staff. "Sir?" His first officer stared at him in shock. "That is an order. Get our people out. I will buy them time." Tay sealed the bridge door and locked his command chair. He set a course directly toward the largest concentration of Devourer ships. The Horizon's Edge, his home for 3 years, would make one last contribution to the war. Lieutenant Hay, monitoring from the Indomitable, saw what Tay was doing. No, no, no. Commodore, abort. Please abort. Tay's voice came over the communication channel, calm and steady. Tell my family I love them. Tell everyone I cleared the path. Then he shut off the communication and engaged the engines at maximum acceleration. The Horizon's Edge slammed into a Devourer defense platform at 12% of light speed. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to a nuclear weapon. The platform and thousands of nearby bioships vaporized instantly. The shockwave cleared a corridor through the Devourer formations. Hay stared at the empty space where Tay's ship had been, tears streaming down her face. She was not the only one crying. Across the fleet, soldiers who had served with Tay felt the loss like a physical blow. But there was no time to mourn. The battle continued. Admiral Jin used the corridor Tay had created. All assault forces, launch. Get to the surface now, while the path is clear. Major Sang stood in the drop bay with 50,000 Marines and 15,000 Velothian soldiers. The largest ground assault in history. This is it, he told his troops. We get one shot at this. Make it count. Thousands of drop pods launched from carriers throughout the fleet. They fell through the nest's toxic atmosphere like a meteor shower. The surface of the planet was a nightmare made real. The ground was not ground, but living tissue. The air burned lungs even through filters. The temperature was over 60 degrees Celsius. DEVOURERS emerged from everywhere. From the ground. From structures. From the air. They came in forms the Marines had never seen before. Some were massive, the size of tanks. Some were small and fast, like deadly insects. All of them were trying to kill the invaders. The Marines formed defensive perimeters around their landing zones and began advancing toward the target. Dr. Me had provided coordinates for the central node. It was located deep underground, beneath the primary breeding chambers. They would have to fight through kilometers of Devourer territory to reach it. Marine Woe fought alongside the same Velothian soldier who had saved him on Velminer. They had become friends over the past weeks, despite the language barrier. Now they covered each other, moving through hell together. Woe saw a new type of Devourer emerge from the ground. It had armor that seemed resistant to kinetic rounds and acid that melted through combat suits. They made this to kill us specifically, Woe shouted to his Velothian friend. How is that possible? The Velothian responded in broken human language. They learn. Always learn. We must be faster. Major Sang led 200 elite troops deeper into the nest. Engineer Gay was with them, carrying the explosive charges that would destroy the node. Every meter they advanced cost lives. Devourers attacked from all directions. The tunnels were narrow and dark, perfect ambush territory. They lost soldiers constantly. 5 dead, 10 dead, 20 dead. The survivors kept moving because stopping meant dying. After 2 hours of continuous combat, they reached the central chamber. What they saw there stopped them in their tracks. The node was massive, the size of a building. It pulsed with neural energy, connected by organic cables to everything on the planet. And guarding it were Devourers, unlike any they had seen before. Each one was the size of a tank, covered in thick armor with multiple blade arms and weapons. There were dozens of them. How long to plant the charges? Sang asked. 3 minutes if no one bothers me. Then we hold for 3 minutes. Everyone, defensive formation. Do not let anything reach the engineer. What followed was the most intense 3 minutes of combat in the entire war. The Guardian Devourers attacked with intelligence and coordination. They worked together, using tactics. The Marines and Velothian soldiers fought desperately, knowing that if even one Devourer reached Day, the mission would fail. Woe saw his Velothian friend take a hit from a blade arm. The alien went down hard, bleeding from a massive wound. Woe dragged him to cover and tried to stop the bleeding. The Velothian looked up at him with dimming eyes and whispered something in his own language. Then he died. Woe felt rage fill him. He stood up and charged the nearest Devourer, firing his weapon continuously. Other Marines joined him. They pushed forward through pure aggression, giving Day the time he needed. Charges set. Day shouted, "Everyone out. 60 seconds." The survivors ran for the exit. Of the 200 who entered the chamber, only 73 made it out. They sprinted through the tunnels as fast as their exhausted legs could carry them. Behind them, the charges detonated. The explosion was not large, but it did not need to be. The charges destroyed the node completely. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The quantum network that connected all Devourers collapsed. 4 million bioships in space suddenly lost coordination. They began drifting or colliding with each other. The unified intelligence that had controlled them was gone. In space, Admiral Jin saw the change on his tactical displays. All ships weapons free. Destroy them all. The human Velothian fleet systematically destroyed the now helpless Devourer ships. It took 6 hours to eliminate all 4 million. The space around the nest filled with debris and frozen biomatter. It was the largest battlefield in galactic history. On the nest's surface, Major Sang and his survivors watched as the planet itself began to die. Without the central consciousness maintaining it, the organic structures collapsed. The pulsing stopped. The whole world started dissolving into biological sludge. Sang activated his communication. Mission complete. The node is destroyed. Requesting immediate evacuation. As the dropships came to retrieve them, Sang counted his surviving troops. Of the 65,000 who landed, only 31,000 were still alive. The cost had been terrible. But the war was over. The final casualty count was devastating. 247 human ships destroyed. 41,000 human personnel killed. 89,000 wounded. 76 Velothian ships lost. 12,000 Velothian casualties. The numbers were hard to comprehend. Lieutenant Hay compiled the casualty reports alone in the chapel aboard the Indomitable. Among the dead was Commodore Tay, whose sacrifice had made the final assault possible. She cried for him and for the 40,000 others who would never see home again. Velothian High Council gathered to try to understand what had happened. First Speaker Cal addressed his people through a galaxy-wide broadcast. 3 generations of war ended in 3 weeks. Humanity came with force we could not imagine. They fought with courage we had never seen. They gave their lives for people they had just met. We called them for backup, and they brought annihilation to our enemy. We will remember this. Forever, we will remember. The Velothians began calling humans the Answered, those who answer when called. The name spread across all 7 Velothian species, and would eventually be used by other alien civilizations who heard the story. True to the Alliance Treaty, Admiral Jin began withdrawing human forces immediately. Some ships stayed to help hunt down any remaining Devourer pockets and to assist with reconstruction. But the main fleet prepared to return home. The war was won. The Alliance did not require permanent occupation. Dr. Me worked with Velothian scientists to ensure no Devourer biomatter survived anywhere. They created detection protocols and sterilization procedures. They systematically checked 89 dead worlds. Some could eventually be terraformed and made habitable again. Others would remain barren for thousands of years. Engineer They helped Velothian engineers build early warning systems throughout both territories. If anything like the Devourers ever emerged again, both species would know immediately and could respond together. Major Sang returned to Earth carrying the ashes of 41,000 soldiers. Over the next year, he attended memorial services on dozens of worlds. He met with families who had lost sons, daughters, husbands, wives, parents. He told them their loved ones had died as heroes. At night, he still dreamed of the battles, the screaming, the blood, the fear. He would carry those memories forever. Marine Wo's name was inscribed on the wall of heroes on Earth, alongside 40,000 others. He had died on the nest, covering the retreat after the node was destroyed. His daughter, only 2 years old when he left, would grow up hearing stories of her father's courage. The war's end sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Other alien species, previously isolated and unaware of each other, detected the massive quantum distortions from the final battle. They investigated and discovered 2 things. First, an extinct threat called the Devourers. Second, a young species called humanity that had brought overwhelming force to defend aliens they had never met. Some civilizations sent messages of gratitude. Some sent messages of fear. A predatory empire called the Kolthun Dominion saw the battle records and immediately began peace negotiations with nearby human colonies. The message was clear. Do not threaten humanity or their friends. The Velothian Cooperative and United Earth Alliance formalized their relationship into a permanent partnership. Technology exchanges began. Velothian shield technology was integrated into new human ship designs. Human weapons were adapted for Velothian vessels. Cultural exchanges started. Velothian students enrolled at Earth universities. Human volunteers traveled to Velothian worlds to help with reconstruction. President Na addressed both species in a joint transmission 5 months after the war ended. We came as strangers. We fought as allies. We continue as friends. This is humanity's promise to the Velothians and to any other species that hears this message. When you call, we will answer. When you need help, we will come. That is who we are. That is who we choose to be. 2 years after the war, Admiral Jin retired from active service. He had led humanity's first major military campaign against an alien threat and won. But the cost haunted him. He spent his retirement visiting the families of those who died, ensuring they knew their sacrifices mattered. Commander Yun continued in the military, now working with Velothian strategists to develop joint defense doctrines. Her tactical innovations during the war had saved countless lives. She received medals from both human and Velothian governments, but said the real honor was bringing soldiers home alive. Lieutenant Hay, now Captain Hay, wrote a comprehensive historical account of the war titled The Answer. It became required reading in both human and Velothian schools. She made sure to include not just the battles, but the personal stories, the fear, the courage, the sacrifice. She wanted future generations to understand the true cost of war. 5 years after the war ended, Captain Hay commanded a joint human Velothian exploration vessel called the Unity. Her crew was mixed, humans and Velothians working seamlessly together. They were exploring uncharted space, looking for new worlds and potentially new civilizations. One day, they detected a signal. It was faint and old, but definitely artificial. They followed it to its source and found a distress beacon from another species. An unknown alien civilization was calling for help. They were being attacked by raiders and facing extinction. Hay read the message carefully. Then she smiled and opened a communication channel. This is Captain Hay of the Alliance vessel Unity. We received your call. Backup is coming. Her crew, both human and Velothian, immediately began preparing. They sent the message back to their respective governments. Within days, a joint response fleet was assembling. Not as large as the one that fought the Devourers, but substantial. Because that was what they did now. When someone called for help, they answered. The galaxy was vast and dangerous. It was full of threats and challenges. But it was also full of potential friends and allies. Humanity had learned that lesson well. They had gone to war for strangers and gained brothers and sisters. They had given their blood and received loyalty in return. On Earth, in the Hall of Remembrance, a plaque honored all who died in the Devourer War. At the bottom was a simple inscription. They answered the call. May we always do the same. And humanity did. Every time someone called for help, they answered. Every time someone faced extinction, they came with ships and soldiers and determination. It became their defining characteristic across the galaxy. Humanity, the species that answers when called. The species that fights for others. The species that keeps its promises. Years passed. Decades. The alliance between humans and Velothians grew stronger. Other species joined, creating a federation of mutual defense and cooperation. The Devourer War became legend, then history, then myth. But the lesson remained. When you call, someone will answer. When you need help, help will come and always, without fail. At the front of any rescue fleet or defense armada were human ships. Because that was who they had chosen to be. The ones who answer. The ones who help. The ones who fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. The galaxy had asked for backup. Humanity had answered with a full war armada. And in doing so, they had changed everything. Not just the outcome of one war, but the very nature of how civilizations treated each other. Help was no longer a maybe. It was a promise. And humanity kept its promises.